Hi, my name's Stewart Lynch. In this video, the second in my Foundation Models framework series, we'll take what we built in part 1 and expand it with interactive prompt building, live streaming responses, and visual feedback in SwiftUI. So let's dive deeper into what's possible with Foundation Models in iOS 26. This is the second video in the series on Apple's Foundation Models framework. If you haven't watched the first video in the series, I really recommend that you do, because I'm going to be assuming that you have, and we'll be using some of the code that we created in that first video. By the end of this video, you'll have learned how to use a prompt builder to facilitate different criteria for prompts, such as a picker using an enum for a workout type, and a slider with ticks to specify time. And then when submitting the prompt, you'll get visual feedback, such as a button being disabled, and a progress view and text view to display the prompt as being processed. We'll also handle markdown responses in the response content. In the second tab, we'll preload a prompt and build a prompt using an array of prompts and stream the response as it comes in with a nice, smooth animation. And the progress view will show the prompt is being processed as well. I do have a starter project for this video, and I encourage you to download it from the link in the description. There are 2 branches, and if you want to work along with me, download the starter project branch. You can either clone the repository or download the zipped archive. I do recommend that you work along with me, but if you prefer, you can also download the completed source code from the completed branch. It's up to you. Again, if you want an explanation of how this project is set up, to generate the tab views with this enum, please watch the introduction to the first video in this series, as it's identical. What I've added to this project in the starter project is the Foundation Manager class that we created in the first video. So this isn't new code. I've also added the Intelligence Unavailable view, which uses a Content Unavailable view when either the device does not support Foundation models or the Foundation model is not yet available. The Navigation Manager class is here so that we can use the enum's raw value for the navigation bar title. This is as well the same as in the first video. And I've also added a file called Session Response with Error. And this contains commented out code that we created in the first video that uses a task unit of work to get the response from the Foundation model session and handle the error. So we'll be using that here. And then finally, in the app start location, here you see that I inject an instance of the Foundation Manager and the Navigation Manager classes into the environment so that we can use them in our tabs. And then finally, we have this playground here that we used in the first video. And this is where I want to start. We can use the playground to test out the Foundation models prompts to see how they work before we integrate them into our project. So I'm going to add a second playground here, and I'm going to call it PromptBuilder. Now remember that there are 3 parts to use Foundation Models Framework once we've imported the module into our project, which we have already done here. First thing we'll need to do is to create a session. And that session is a language model session. And then we'll need to create a prompt. In the first video, our prompts were just simple strings. Well, we can also use a prompt builder to create more complex prompts. And when we do this, we'll create multiple prompt strings that will get used by the Foundation model. In this video, I'm going to be building an exercise generator for the first 2 tabs. So why not give the Foundations model some specific instructions like this? I want to have an exercise routine. I want it to focus on the lower back. And I want that to be for about 20 minutes. You can see in the preview now that we have 2 playground tabs. So let me switch to the Prompt Builder tab. Well, now that I have the prompt, I'll need to create a task unit of work, because it's asynchronous, and try and await the call to the session's respond method, submitting the prompt that this time is a prompt builder. When this runs, it takes about 12 seconds to respond. So when we build our UI, we want to give our users some indication that it's thinking. But when it completes, you can see that the playground here, we have the session prompt and the session content being returned. If we view the content, we can see that it gives me a nice 20-minute exercise routine for the lower back. What I'd like to do then is to use the UI that I provided in the first tab that's going to allow the user to specify different types of exercises and lengths to generate the exercise routine and at the same time display the markdown content properly. If you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment. And be sure to subscribe to my channel and enable notifications. You can also subscribe to my newsletter that comes out on Wednesdays 2 or 3 times a month. I'll leave a link in the description. The newsletter will tell you about my current and future videos, along with other things that I discover along my coding and personal journey that I think you might find interesting. If you enjoy my content and you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. A link's in the description. And if you become a $5 a month monthly member, you can get access to all of my videos, sometimes up to a month before they are released on YouTube. In this tab, I've created 2 controls that's going to allow us to specify one of 3 stretch types and indicate that the length of the stretch routine in minutes. So I have this stretch type enum that is case iterable and identifiable. That allows me to create a picker view for the stretch type, and I can iterate over all cases to display the raw value in a text view. And that choice is bound to a state variable called stretch type that defaults to the lower back or the LBAC case. Below this, I've also created a slider that is bound to a state variable, and I have used the new slider tick constructor to add tick marks every 5 minutes from 5 to 60 minutes. And if you want to see how I created this, you can watch the video on this and other new controls in iOS 26. I'll leave a link in the description. This is what we're going to use to build our prompt that we'll submit to the foundation model, and the response content will update the state variable called response content. And this is going to be presented in a scroll view that will only scroll if necessary, and it's got a canary background, and the corners are rounded with a clip shape. Now I'm going to need a button to initiate the request. However, our prompt is going to need to use the Foundations model framework, and only if the OS and the device support it. So we can use the Foundations manager that is injected into the environment to check. But first, I'll need to import Foundations model. Next, I'll get the manager from the environment using foundationmanager.self and set that to a variable called manager. And at the same time, as we learned in the last video, we'll want to check when our app comes into the foreground, so we'll create a scene phase variable from the scene phase key path in the environment. And to fix the preview, we'll need to inject an instance of the Foundation Manager class into the environment here as well. So first, let's make sure that we check for the availability of the Foundations model whenever our view's scene phase changes to active. So I'll attach to the navigation stack an onChange modifier. And I'll watch for changes on the scene phase. And that's going to give us an old value and a new value. I don't worry about the old value. I just need to know what the new value is. So I'll call that new phase. Then what I'll do is I'll check to see if that new phase is active. And if that's the case, we can call the check is available method from our manager class. Now we should only show this scroll view and the button to generate an exercise prompt if the Foundations model is available. Otherwise, we'll just show that intelligence unavailable view. So we'll surround the scroll view and its modifiers with an if statement that checks for this. And it uses the Boolean computed property in the manager class. Otherwise, then we'll display the intelligence unavailable view in its place. Now, above the scroll view, we can create that button that will generate the response to a prompt. So we'll just create a button with the label Create Exercise. I'll come back to the action in a second, but I'm going to give the button a bordered prominent style. For the action then, let's do another guard check to see if the foundation model is available, just as a second check. Otherwise, we'll simply just return. Next, I'm going to create my prompt using the prompt builder. And I'm going to use interpolated properties from our two controls. So for my first prompt, it's just simply going to be a string, create a stretching exercise for me. For the second prompt, I'm going to say, focus the exercise on stretch type.raw value. So we can use the string interpolation here to get that raw value. And then I'm going to have the exercise last for length minutes using string interpolation here as well. But just to be picky, since length is a double, I'm going to convert it to an int. Well, we've got our prompt now, so we can create a language model session. Next then, we'll need a task unit of work to execute the session's respond method that returns the prompt and a response content. So we'll assign to our state variable, which is the response content, the result of trying and awaiting the session's respond method to the prompt, and we'll take the content property of that result. So I can tap on the button now, and we know that it's going to take 10 or 12 seconds, so we'll just have to wait for it to finish. There's no visual representation or indication here. When it does, we get a 10-minute lower back exercise. That's nice. It does, however, give us markdown, and I'm going to fix that shortly. But the big problem I have here is that this create exercise button is still active even when it's thinking. And I have no indication that the app is even working. Well, it turns out that the session object has a property that we can use, and that is an isResponding Boolean property. So in order to use this, though, we'll need to move our session object out of our button action and move it up to the top of our struct so we can access it from different parts of our code. Well, now then, I can apply a disable modifier to our button, and I'll set it to the session isResponding property. So if it is responding, it's going to be disabled. And at the same time, I might as well add an overlay to the scroll view while the session is responding. So to the scroll view, I'm going to attach an overlay. And then I can use an if clause if the session is responding. And within the if clause, create a vstack and create a simple spinning progress view. And then below that, a text view with the string generating exercise. And I can set the font to a large title. So let's try this out by creating an upper back exercise for, let's say, 25 minutes. After about 10 seconds, we get a response. But we saw the progress happening. Now, unfortunately, SwiftUI is only aware of some markdown syntax and not all. So this response uses bold and header markdown tags. Well, what I can do is I can change the initializer of the text view in our scroll view to use the init method, and this will give us the localized string key, which will automatically convert certain markdown tags syntax in SwiftUI. So let's try that out. You'll see that the bold syntax is set in our content, but the header tags are not. So rather than trying to fix this somehow, I'm just going to create a function to remove those header tags. So back in the Foundation Manager class, let's create a new function called minimize markdown. And it's going to accept the content and return a string. So I can just create an array of tags that I want to remove. Like, for example, let me create the first 4 of the header tags. That's just hash marks within strings. And I know I've also seen a horizontal rule tag in some of my responses, so I'm going to add that as well. Now, since the content we're passing in is a let, I can simply assign the content parameter to a variable of the same name. And now I can loop through the array of tags with a for each loop. And for each tag, I can assign the content, the new one, the content variable, the existing one, replacing occurrences of the tag with an empty string. And then I can return that updated content. Back in our view then, I can wrap this try await call that gives us that content string with the manager's minimize markdown function. So let's get a 25-minute neck exercise. Great, it worked. Now, one last thing. I'm not getting any errors here, but this could possibly happen. So we're not catching any possible errors, and therefore the user wouldn't know what was going on. So if I go to the code snippet that we created in the last video and I provided here, I can see that it uses the do catch statement to catch any errors that might happen, and it updates the response content with that error message. So I'm going to simply copy the code here, and I'm going to return to my view and paste it into the button task action. And then I can replace the response content here with the one that we created. Let's try one more now to make sure it works. Great, it does. The Foundation Models framework is huge, and this series that I'm creating is really only scratching the surface to demonstrate what's possible and to get you started. Now, if you really want to dive deeply into foundation models, I highly recommend Mark Morrican's book, AI Mastery in SwiftUI. I've had the pleasure of working through beta versions of the book as Mark's been developing it, and you'll find no better guide and resource. Mark really knows how to present topics that are thorough and easy to understand. My affiliate link to the book is in the description, so using that link will help support this channel as well. In this second view, what I want to do is to create a 30-minute stretch routine using each of the different types of stretches defined in our stretch type enum. So I've set up our view to use the foundation model framework just as we did in the previous view. Foundation models has been imported. So we have access to the foundation manager and the nav manager from the environment. And I have a session set up for the language model session. So this means then I can check if the model is available and display our button and scroll view. If it isn't available, I show the intelligence unavailable view. The monitoring of the scene phase is going to ensure that it checks each time the view comes into the foreground as active. So all we need to do is to create the action in the button. And I always like to do a guard check first to make sure that the foundation model is available. Otherwise, I'll just return. And since I already have a session created at the top of our view, I can disable the button if the session is responding. So we'll need the prompt and the task for the action. So for the prompt, I'm going to use a prompt builder, and I'm going to start with a statement that simply says, create a 30-minute stretching routine for me, giving me 10 minutes to each of the following areas. Well, those following areas are the cases of our stretch type enum, and its case iterable. So I can use the stretch types all cases array to iterate over each of the cases and map those each ones into a prompt using the case's raw value. So now we have 4 prompt strings within our prompt builder. When I tap the button, I'll also want to reset the response content. So now I can create a task unit of work. Within the task, I can assign to the response content the result of trying and awaiting the sessions respond method, passing in the prompt, and to extract the content. Now, if I tap the button now, I get the progress view displaying, no text view this time, to show that it's working, and eventually we'll get our routine as requested. It has that markdown, so let's have SwiftUI do what it can by using the text view's initializer to guarantee a localized string key using the response's content. Now this is fine, but if I want to stream the content as it's being generated, I need to do something else. I don't want it to have to wait. I want to see it as it comes in. Well, we can do this by creating a stream using the sessions stream response method and passing in the prompt. So this means then our task has to change to handle partial results as it comes in. And we do this by using a for loop that will try and await the partial result in the stream. And then when we get it, we can assign that to the response content, that partials content property. So let me try this again. This is much better. The progress view is still showing and the button is disabled, but we get to see the content as it's being generated. And I can make this even smoother with a with animation block on the content as it's being generated. Well, I still have that markdown header tags to deal with, but I can do that because we have that function, which is the manager's minimize markdown function, and we simply have to wrap this content in that function. Now, as I tap the button, the content appears much more smoothly and the header tags are removed. Now, you can see here that the preview crashed. And if this happens, just do a Command Option P to refresh the preview and try again. Now, as with our last case, we're not handling any errors, but we can use our code snippet to fix that here too. So let me go to that session response with error file and copy the code within the comment markers and return to our action and post it into our task. And then we can replace the content of the do block with what we had before, which is that try await loop for the partial results. Now there's one more thing that I can do to improve the user experience. Since we're not giving the user any options to change the prompt like we did in the last view, we can preload it when the view appears, so that it will speed up the response time. So in order to do that, I need to move the prompt creation from within the button action up to the view so that it's accessible anywhere else in the view, and I'll make it a private property. Then I can create an onAppear block on the navigation stack that'll use the sessions pre-warm method, passing in the prompt prefix, which is our prompt. And there you have it. There's still lots more to cover, so stay tuned for more videos to come. And if you're coming to this after I've created those other videos, make sure you check out the playlist. A link is in the description. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps. And remember, you can get access to my videos by downloading my free channel listing app for the Mac, or you can use the web version on an iPhone or an iPad to get better searching and viewing of my content. Links are in the description.